We will call to order the regular board meeting of the Board of Election Commissioners for the City of Chicago. Good morning. My name is Marisel Hernandez. Seated to my right is Commissioner William Kresse, and to my left is Commissioner Jonathan Swain. Next item on the agenda is the consideration of the agenda. Are there any proposed changes? If not, we will proceed.
There is one. The agenda shows a set of minutes for the November 6th meeting. Those aren't prepared this time. That was a meeting that was recessed and not adjourned. So if I could have that stricken from the agenda.
Okay.
So moved.
Yeah, is there a second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Okay. So we will go on with the next item on the agenda, which is the approval of the regular board meeting minutes of October 23rd, 2018. Is there a motion to approve?
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Motion passes and the minutes are approved. Next is the Executive Director's report. Mr. Gough.
Thank you, Madam Chairwoman. Just to let the board members know, we had a debriefing on November 30th. We did not complete it. Here are some draft notes from that meeting. We are getting ready to set up another meeting to finish up these items. We're working on early vote. I think we have a handle on some new places that we may be going to. And let's see what else. Oh, then after we finish our debriefing, we're going over, I'm going to be moving out to the warehouse for a day or two to help set up the new, not new equipment, but to get prepared for this upcoming election. There's a lot of things that we need to work on, and I'm going to sit down with Keith Carter and his staff. There's some things that we need to talk about. So I just want you to be aware of that. We are working 7 days a week from now on. The only items that Christmas Eve, we will be letting staff leave at 1 o'clock. Christmas Day, we're off. New Year's Eve, we're letting staff leave at 1 o'clock. We are closed on New Year's Day itself. You know, this is probably the hardest time. Our staff has worked for approximately 6-7 months straight on preparing these elections. And they're doing an excellent job, but if you go around the room, you see how tired they are. And this petition is really, really tough this year. In fact, Charles is down setting up a couple of mayoral petitions that they're working on today, just to let you know that once we get the top of the ticket finished, we may be able to release 15 wards. Now, what I need to ask the board members to think about this, when we have those ready, do we send them out or do we wait until everything in the entire city is ready to be mailed out? So something to think about. I'm putting together pros and cons right now. Jim Allen and I spoke about it a couple of times, and it's something that, you know, we really need to take a look at. So I don't need an answer right now because we're still that far ahead, but it's something that we need to think about. And I will be giving other write-ups of what's going on at a later date.
Mr. Allen, our Communications Director.
Good morning, Commissioners. Briefly, as Mr. Gough referenced, we've been very busy with news media and FOIA requests related to the news media for all kinds of documents related to petitions and now objections, as well as related paperwork. In addition to requests from the just recently completed election. This election season has seen even interest from a documentarian, Steve James, who is of Hoop Dreams fame and The Interrupters fame. He's down on the 6th floor watching the process of a line-by-line record examination right now. So they're going to be following the election all the way to election day and potentially any runoffs. Next, just want to bring to your attention the contract with CPURX, which has been our web hosting provider since 2013, had expired September or October, I believe, They've been with us, like I said, 2013. They've been extremely reliable, very affordable, and highly effective in terms of managing all the traffic loads during peak periods. However, there has been a lot more stress on their operation from our end because of the increased number of security protocols we've demanded of them. So everything from the alerts that we get through various law enforcement agencies, in addition to doing a lot more close monitoring of the servers, put a lot of stress on them, and they put in for a modest increase of 6%. Also, since they're only looking to continue with us through the April election, the dollar amount will not require board approval. So therefore, I'm planning on putting through a purchase order through Mr. Gough. It's under $10,000, I believe, so far under the threshold that requires board approval. Other than that, that's all we've got right now.
You said through April?
Through the April or possibly through May. We're
Because
gonna
that's when the contract ends. No, you said the contract ended
The
September.
contract ended.
Okay.
We'd like, yeah,
We've continued working with them, obviously.
But you're planning for them to hopefully be our vendor after April, or
No.
No, not at all.
They're looking to move on because
It's too much.
it's a little bit too much.
Okay, got it. That's why I didn't understand.
It's not like, we're not their routine client.
Okay.
But they've also even gone so far as to recommend, top tier resources for us. Thinking in terms of like Microsoft, that might be better suited to handling what we do.
And primarily, the difference is because of security.
Yes.
Okay, got it. All right.
So we'll be going through a bidding process or
Yes.
examination process soon?
Yes, but they've agreed to stay on at least through the April election, so that we don't have to deal with this now.
Okay.
Very good.
Thank you.
That's it.
We will now proceed to old business, infrastructure projects, changes in election administration and voting equipment.
may I make a comment on that, Madam Chairwoman? Right after the April election, we're pulling all the documentation that we did prior to when we first started with the bid process, and we're gonna continue it in April.
Okay, great. Electronic poll books, is there anything?
Everything's going all right. They pulled the memory from them. They downloaded. Hopefully, I'm gonna meet with Al today. The voter history should be completed, but until we look at the documentation, I'm not signing off on it yet.
With respect to electronic poll books, I think what I may have mentioned to both of you all about possibility of making the media view available. Have we had any more conversation about that?
I have.
Yeah, I forwarded a request to ES&S, and so the one change that I'd like to see is right now the bar graphs work that you roll over them, and then a number will appear as you roll over at different age groups. So 18 to 24, you use your mouse to roll over it, then you see a number, and I'd like that to just present those numbers, in addition to the bar graph itself. Then we have to try to find a way to just feed that to our website, because we don't want the entire planet hitting on ES&S's system. So we want to have like an independent feed so that no one is hammering the ES&S system. We want that to remain vibrant for its primary function, which is feeding data to and from the individual poll books in the precincts.
Yeah, that's an excellent
Yeah.
thought.
So that's what we're pursuing with them.
If I know, so you just mentioned you had some the web provider is a bit overloaded, I guess, presumably.
Not overloaded in terms of traffic.
If in the short term, if that can't be done in the short term, just a thought as an intermediate step is potentially giving access to those that have credentials.
We do that now.
For the media view?
Yes.
Okay.
We do that now on a limited basis, but I agree with you that we need to expand that, and at a minimum, if we can take periodic screenshots and put them up on a designated section of the website every 15 minutes or something like that.
Or every hour when it updates.
Every hour, because that's what
Exactly.
they were updated.
So But the screenshot, again, has to present all that data. It doesn't help you if it's
Properly,
just a
right.
bunch
I
of
understand,
Rs.
yeah,
So-
that's wise.
But hopefully we can get that done relatively easily.
Okay. Thank you. Next item is legislation.
Well, the veto session has ended, and the bills we were tracking through the veto session did not move. So the jail voting bill is vetoed, and so is the electronic, the bill that would have required us to use only cross-check, or only ERIC and not cross-check. So those bills are dead in the water. No new legislation at the moment is moving anywhere. So I think we need to probably wait until the next administration comes in.
When does the new legislative session begin?
Second week of January.
Yeah, roughly.
Okay. So if we're going to propose any new legislation, when would we have to have that?
Well, it can be proposed. It doesn't have to be proposed at the beginning of the session, but the sooner the better for the very first session.
Typically, you provide us with a potential legislative agenda. I know there's a lot of other stuff going on, so how do you foresee that flowing with in the context of all the other things? Not like it's a lot, I mean, you know.
Yeah.
You know.
Just usual stuff.
Just usual stuff.
Nothing going on.
Well, we are planning to move forward on wanting to push again for universal vote centers, for expanded vote by mail. We have issues we'd like to try to push again for a bill that would have students out of the schools, at least in Chicago, on Election Day. We're actually starting to get support from the inside of public schools on that, and various issues like that. So, you know, it's an ongoing process, and we'll try to move on it despite everything that's going on. When I get to the legal report, you know, we'll talk about the electoral board cases, and to some extent we're lucky to have only 181 cases filed.
In the 40 days, we're going to try to do something about that.
Early vote 40 days.
Early vote 40 days.
Yes. If we could roll that back a little, that would be nice. Especially, I mean, as a reminder to everybody, our February 26th election happens after we're supposed to start early voting for our April 2nd runoffs. So we won't be doing 40 days of early voting for the April runoffs.
So at a minimum, if we have not found traction, generally finding traction, at least with the municipal elections, because where it logically makes no sense.
Right.
Um,
there's certainly ways our bills could affect only cities with populations of over 2 million.
Yeah. One other thought, just to lump it into the pot. I think that we might want to suggest or revisit this question about two signatures, or only be one person being able to sign a petition in the municipal elections. Because it's my understanding that if, let's say someone's running for state rep, they could sign for a district or state senator for a district. One person can sign 2 different petitions for the same district. Is that right?
That's correct, within the same political party.
Right,
Yes.
exactly. So, I mean, there's, you know, it seemingly has become, from what I've heard in the conversation around this signing 2 petition question, that though that's been a law for a while, that technology now has surfaced, I think last cycle and now this time, that has made it very easy to find that where before it was very difficult. And so I think it's causing, it'll ultimately, we'll see how the cases play out, but has the potential to put an undue burden on voters, I think, especially in cases where, you know, people are trying to get on the ballot and the signatures may not be wherever they may be. I think that's something we probably should look at to try to amend.
That is a very good idea. I'm a little nervous about how that issue is going to work out with these cases, because as you pointed out, with the new technology and computer software, it's become much easier to find the double signatures,
Right.
and therefore much easier to plead.
Right.
But it still remains very difficult to prove.
Correct.
And that's going to require.
And that's why I go to the burden, because I mean, if you just play it out, I mean, there's a few different ways you could prove it. You know, one of which being subpoenaing the actual signer, right? And we try not to use that. Historically, we've tried not to use that, except in extreme cases, You know, there's always a question about fairness, a question about, you know, being reversed on appeal, things of that nature. When you start saying that we're doing something for to benefit a voter versus doing something to that might prevent somebody from getting on the ballot. So I think it's something we need to look at very closely, or suggest that we look at very closely after this election, or for the legislative session, rather.
Right, right. Well, duly noted, and it's a good idea.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Lasker. Now we'll go into new business, and we have certain advisory questions of public policy. Mr. Lasker?
Thank you, Madam Chairwoman. Pursuant to Section 10-8 of the Illinois Election Code and Section 500.11 of our board's General Rules of Administration, our staff has performed reviews of all petitions that were filed with us, with the board, for the February 26th ballot. Of all the candidate petitions, according to our apparent conformity policy, if an electoral board objection is filed against a petition, we let that electoral board objection run its course. So for those candidates who have not been objected to, the staff has reviewed their petitions and found no apparent errors. They did find apparent errors on other petitions, but they have objections filed against them. There are several referenda petitions, however, that did not receive any objections filed against them. We are past the objection filing deadline, and there are some that did not fulfill the statutory requirement of a minimum signature requirement. I would point out that the Illinois Supreme Court, as recently as 2015, has ruled that ballot access signature requirements are a mandatory requirement, and they are to be strictly enforced. There is no such thing as substantial compliance with one of the clear-set signature requirements. So I'll inform you of the petitions, that the referenda petitions that our staff has identified as not fulfilling that requirement. There were two separate sets of petitions that were filed seeking to create an Austin mental health district. The requirement for both of those sets of petitions would have been 2,835 signatures. The first set of petitions had only 1,323 signatures. The second set had only 1,854 signatures. There were several advisory referenda petitions. One would have created a marijuana tax revenue question in the 16th precinct of the 30th ward. It needed 19 signatures, but they only filed 17. There was an assessment limits referendum for Ward 19 that required 2,028 signatures, but only 10 signatures were filed. There was a marijuana revenue tax question for the 17th precinct of the 24th ward that required 21 signatures, but only 20 signatures were filed. There was an assessment limits referendum proposed for precinct 38 of Ward 48. It required 47 signatures, but only 35 signatures were filed. And then there were four additional separate petition sets that were filed where they did not specify the precinct or ward or any of the territory in which they wanted the questions to be submitted. Essentially, they left the lines blank, and therefore we would have no idea which ballot to put them on. The election code does require that each petition set have a heading that contains not only the information about the question itself, but also the territory in which it's to be proposed to the voters, and that's a mandatory requirement, and these have failed to meet that. That's one homelessness treatment referendum in an unspecified territory, and then there are three separate questions that would have dealt with the assessment limits in three separate unspecified territories. I would also just remind you that when the staff does the signature reviews on these, they do not do a line-by-line analysis of whether each individual signature is genuine or proper. All they do is count up the total to what's apparent on the face of the forms. With all that in mind, I would propose a motion to find that those referenda as described are not in apparent conformity with mandatory provisions of the Illinois Election Code, and they shall not be certified to the February 26, 2019 ballot.
Counsel, you mentioned that any petitions that have been challenged, we didn't included here under apparent conformity. In the event that a challenge is, say, dropped, I take it that then there's a possibility that we could come back here and there could be additional apparent conformity matters coming before this board at a later meeting.
That's correct. It's my Section 10-8 of the Election Code doesn't specify. Section 10-8, according to the case law, makes us the gatekeepers to keep petitions, and whether it's questions or candidates, to keep them off the ballot when their petitions are not in apparent conformity. So in interpreting the board's own policy on that matter, Section 500.11, it appears to me that when there is an active objection pending, we let that objection run its course. If the objection is withdrawn, then there's no longer an objection pending, and we would see what the result of the withdrawal was.
So there's a possibility we could revisit different cases at a later meeting.
There is that possibility. A second possibility is that the electoral board, in order for an objection to be withdrawn, it has to be a motion to withdraw. And it's in the discretion of the electoral board. The motion could be denied and the board could rule if there's something that's so egregious as an apparent conformity flaw in the petition. So one of two options, yes.
I do have one question. Some of these apparent conformities are, down by 2 signatures, 1 signature, 12 signatures. My question is, how are the proponents of these referenda informed of the number of signatures they need?
Well, by statute, the statute sets the signature requirement. It's different for different kinds of referenda. All advisory referenda follow the same signature requirement. Other referenda have an actual authorizing statute that might be in a different body of law. It could be in the tax code, the municipal code. Those statutes usually have a signature requirement. If that authorizing statute does not have a signature requirement, then it defaults to the general rule in the election code. So it's a statutory signature requirement, most of which are based upon a certain percentage of the number of voters in a previous election.
But ultimately, it's up to the proponent of the advisory referenda to find the section of the code.
Yes.
Once they find the proper section of the code, it's for them to determine what that percentage of registered voters is by talking to our office or what have you, getting data from the website or whatever.
Correct.
And determining the number themselves.
That is correct.
Okay.
Yeah, statutes place no...
I guess the other thing what I'm trying to understand is that there's no burden upon us to have to indicate for any particular type of referenda, for a particular subdivision, that there's no, we don't promote, here's the number of signatures you need. Like we may or may not do for an election.
That's very correct. There is no requirement whatsoever in the municipal code and the election code or any other body of law that an election authority post signature requirements. Now, the State Board of Elections, for example, posts many different kinds of signature requirements in its annual guidebooks. We do also for some of these elections, but that's not at all mandatory. Okay. And just like the State Board does not publish signature requirements for every single village and municipality and township and district throughout the state, we also don't publish signature requirements for every single precinct within the city.
Got it.
Yeah. But you do provide the guidelines.
Oh, we provide the guidelines, which are on our website and available at our counters, and they cite right to the statute, they explain the rule, and then we also do provide the election result data right on our website. So it's not a big challenge.
Got it. Just wanted to highlight that.
Okay. Is there a motion to find that the questions of public policy described by Mr. Lasker are not in apparent conformity?
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Motion passes. Next item on the agenda is the legal report. Mr. Lasker?
No, you got it.
We need a resolution first, Madam Chairwoman.
Very bottom, page 3.
Oh, thank you.
Snuck that one in on you.
Mr. Lasker?
The state and federal election laws require preservation of election materials for at least 22 months following the election. We have a pretty big warehouse, but it gets filled up pretty fast. It has now been more than 22 months since the November 8th, 2016 general election. There are no election contests or recounts, and it's past the filing deadline for those. We also have no pending litigation involving that election, and we would therefore request that a resolution authorizing our staff to dispose of those materials in compliance with state and federal law be granted.
Just for the record, there's also been no FOIA request for any of these materials.
No, and generally these materials actually are not even subject to FOIA, yeah.
There are no further questions. Is there a motion to approve the disposal of records from the November 8, 2016 general election in accordance with Illinois Election Code and Local Records Act?
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Motion passes. Next item is now the legal report. Mr. Lasker?
My report to you is that our staff did a tremendous job facilitating 181 initial hearings and 181 objection cases yesterday. We have recruited, I think it's 18 new hearing officers who have participated in 6 hours of sort of classroom study. They did a mock trial, and then they came and sat in, and many of them observed the more experienced hearing officers yesterday morning before the new hearing officers had their cases in the afternoon. I just want to compliment everybody involved in that process. That it's never an easy ride. There were certainly bumps in the road throughout the day, but at the end of the day, it was done, and all the cases were heard. And of course, they're not completed. They're moving on with briefing schedules, and Mr. Holliday's not here because he's running a bunch of records exams downstairs. As Mr. Gough pointed out, it's a challenge this year because we have no incumbent mayor running, and we have 21 candidates who filed nomination papers for that office, and multiple candidates for clerk and treasurer. So we have a lot of citywide but petitions for the candidates, with 12,500 as a minimum signature requirement, and so there's a lot going on. But I'm just glad that yesterday got off to a good start, and we'll hope things keep moving smoothly.
In fact, it went faster than we ever thought it would. It really did. Adam changed the 30-minute time limit to 15 minutes. So some people said, "Where's the old guy?" Meaning Kim Scanlon. But everybody got the work done.
Well, I'm sorry, clarify, 30 minutes to 15 minutes of?
In scheduling, I asked around. I couldn't remember. Do we usually set them 30 minutes apart or 15 minutes apart? And people were telling me 15 minutes apart, so I scheduled them 15 minutes apart. And I heard a little bit about that yesterday from the attorneys representing the parties. And lo and behold, 4 years ago it was 30 minutes. In prior cycles it has been 15. I was not trying to change anything. I think we'll go back to 30 minutes next time. Although I think those attorneys lost some weight,
Yes.
running back and forth. I
They're
made them
wearing their
sweat a little
tennis
bit.
shoes.
I said to one, "This will be my 15 minutes of fame," and he said, "Your 15 minutes of infamy." But by the end of the day, they were giving me handshakes and thumbs up and telling me they all got it done. And honestly, the end result is the same. Even when you schedule them 30 minutes apart, there's so many attorneys that have so many cases, they have to be at 6 places at the same time, and things get backed up. So it really was a relatively normal first day of hearings yesterday. Yeah.
Well, I have to thank you for all the work you've done with these hearing officers, the training, organizing all of this, and getting it done so that yesterday, it went very smoothly. I think you did a great job.
Thank you for that. I also want to point out that Barbara Goodman, who's a longtime hearing officer for the State Board of Elections, the County Board, and of course with us, she helped develop that curriculum, and I have to tip my hat to all the experienced hearing officers who have really been doing a nice job of mentoring the newer ones too. Yeah.
Great.
Thank you. We do not have a financial report. I did not receive any requests for public comment today. Is there a need for executive session, Mr. Lasker?
Not today.
If not, then we will adjourn. Mr. Gough, do we need a meeting next week?
you know,
We don't need the regular board, we will certainly need the electoral board next week. And I would say that with the amount that you will be coming for electoral board, we could always call a special meeting 48 hours ahead of time if we need one for this board.
Okay.
I'd say let's just adjourn until the next regular scheduled meeting.
And that
On the
would be-
27th.
We're scheduling it for December 27th.
Correct.
Okay. Is there a motion to adjourn to, until our next scheduled meeting on December 27, 2018?
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Motion passes. We are adjourned.